Yes, sir. That was my introduction into Colorado, is that people did not like Texas much. Now they get to share that with the Californians. And I've got a feeling we'll have a bunch of them out here trying to dry off soon. But anyway, they put me out at the Matchless Mine, and that was really my goal. Is I wanted to go out there and I wanted to tell people the truth about the Tabors, the Matchless Mine, and Baby Doe. Am I talking loud enough for all of you? Okay. I don't want to yell, but, you know, that's about the size of my cabin up there at the Matchless. Maybe it's a little bigger. But anyway, so that's what I do. I'm going to tell people the true story of the Tabors, Augusta, and Baby Doe. How long have I got?
You know, half an hour, 45 minutes. You have plenty of time.
I don't know if I can talk that fast. Anyway, so I've done several of these. I do a thing called debunking. I want people to know the truth about Baby Doe, Augusta, and Horace. So that's why I'm here. I've had some great mentors. One on Miss Janice Fox. She was the historian over at the library in Leadville. And they decided she probably knew too much, and it was time for her to retire. So she did. She retired, and now she's working over at the Jewish synagogue and doing a great job over there. And so if you ever get to Leadville, stop by that synagogue on the weekends and see Janice Fox. She's amazing. She's going to be our Grand Marshal in the parade this year. It's a well-deserved acknowledgement. But anyway, so Horace Tabor and his brother, when they were young men, decided they didn't like their stepmother very much. And they left home. They took their tools and they got on a train, and a man came up to them and he said, I could tell by your tools, young men, that you're both masons and that I have a stone quarry and maybe you'd like to have a job. And they did. They got on that train and they went down to Augusta, Maine with that man. And they went to work, and Horace was a lucky guy because not only did he find a job, he found his first wife, Augusta. She was the daughter of that stone mill operator. She'd been sick as a young woman, and so she taught herself a lot of things. She's in bed, she read, and so she was very knowledgeable. And Horace and she fell in love. He told her, he says, I realize I'm not going to inherit your dad's quarry. You've got 7 brothers. I think I'll go look for another job. And he had heard that they were offering land to anyone who was against slavery down in, oh boy, see, there we go. I haven't done this since last Labor Day, so you guys hang in there with me. What is that state next to Colorado?
Kansas?
Kansas, that's it. I knew you guys could help me. Don't tell my doctor, though. She's already telling me. She says, I think you got dementia. I said, oh, no. Come on my tour and let me know if you say that. But anyway, this is a good way to start this out again. he went to Kansas, got his land, started all that, went back, and he married Augusta, brought her down there, and probably the 2 driest years Kansas had ever had. Only one that produced anything there was Augusta. She had a baby boy. And so that's the one Tabor boy that has survived. And I'll tell you about the other children here soon. But anyway, so Nathaniel Maxey Tabor was his name. Horace has decided maybe they're not meant to be farmers. And he heard about the gold over in Colorado. So he's packed everybody up and headed for Colorado. Did you know, this really doesn't pertain to the Tabors, that a lot of the people, when they would travel, they'd go as far as they could until winter came in, the green belt was gone. They'll stop and build themselves a cabin, and when they got ready to leave the next summer, when it got green again, they'd burn down that cabin. Poor Indians, they got blamed for a lot of things they didn't do. The reason they burned down their cabins was to get the nails back. They're going to use those when they build their next cabin. Anyway, just a little tidbit I thought maybe you'd like to know. They've headed out and they've come to Colorado, and they've stopped at different places. They stopped in Denver. They like Denver a lot, but they're going to go look for gold. When they left there, they're headed over. They're going to go to Colorado Springs. They're going to go to Cripple Creek, all kinds of places. Any place that said, gold, we found gold, that's where they're going to show up. They even went as far as to go up to Black Hawk in Central City, and they made a big loop, and eventually they've ended up down by Leadville and Buena Vista. They stopped at a little town called Granite. He said, okay, this is where we're going to live. We'll build a cabin, we'll build a mercantile store, and we'll stay here forever. Not true. Just about that same time that they got it settled in, a group of prospectors are coming right up that river. And that group of prospectors, there was a little guy named Abe Lee. He's a character. He laughs and carries on all the time. And he is telling them, he says, you know, if California can find gold, we can find gold. And so it's winter time. Hard time to find gold in that river, but he's going to do it. He's got his gold pan, and he's in the middle of that river, and he'd been down, and he's going to run that pan back and forth. And one time he stood up and he said, I got all of California right here. That's why they called that one area California Gold. He had big nuggets of gold in that pan. That started the gold rush up towards Leadville. People just followed that river right on up because they knew that nugget did not come from down in the ground. It's rolled right down that river. So they've gone on up there, and they started a little town up there called Oro City. Well, Oro City did quite well. Horace and Augusta heard about that. They packed everything up, and goodbye, Granite. They've headed for Oro City. When they got there, the miners are so thrilled to see a woman in town, they built her a cabin. She walked in there and she said, oh my, this is too big just for me and my husband and baby. And so what she did, she's taken a blanket, put that blanket right down the middle of that cabin, Half is going to be her home with Horace. Half is going to be a mercantile store. She did quite well at that mercantile store. Horace would go out every day and he'd look for his gold. And at the end of the year, on an average, most of those people made around $5,000. It was a lot of money back then. Multiply any of this money amounts I'm talking about by 200, and you'd have the amount that it would be worth today. Well, that lasted for about 12 years. The gold is fading out. Actually, they found it again later on, but I'm not going to go into that. It's not nearly as much fun. So the miners are leaving. One of them came over and onto the north side, and he's looking for gold. Took it to the assay office, and he said, "We found gold all over the place down there south of town. I'm north of town now, and all I'm finding is this ugly black sand." Assay officer looked at him and he said, "Quit looking for gold. That is not our standard now. Silver is our standard, and what you got in that hand there is silver. You better go make yourself a claim." So he did. That was George Fryer. Made $1 million, went to town, went to Denver a lot. That guy was just like the people nowadays. Went to Denver, spent his money on gambling, whiskey, and women. One morning, he didn't show up for breakfast. He went and looked. He'd overdosed. Just like today. You get lots of money, you go kill yourself. Anyway, we've got a whole hill over there in Leadville. It's called Friar Hill. That's where the matchless is. So anyway, Horace and Augusta have left over there at Oro City. They come into this little town where everybody is settling. They all got together and they decided, we got to name this town. And they thought, well, what shall we call it? We're going to call it Silverville? Nah. How about...
Ma'am, there's no eating in here.
Huh?
Please, no thank you.
Oh, sorry.
I have real low blood sugar.
Okay.
It's
Yes.
just cheese.
Okay.
I'll be really
Okay.
careful, okay? Otherwise, I'm gonna.
I don't want you to fall out and
I'm
eat
gonna
some
don't.
cheese, please.
Fall on the floor.
Nope, no falling out around here, people. But anyway, so they've come to this little town. They're going to name it. They thought for a while that they would just call it Slab Town. Everything is made out of slabs of wood. Why not? Well, it's just flat out ugly. That's why. They finally came around to naming it Leadville. They've got Leadville named here now. Horace and Augusta moved there, and he built her that 2-story house right there on a side road called Harrison. The main road that came through Leadville was on down to the south. That was 2nd Street or State Street, whichever you wanted to call it. They figured out, though, State Street was just too steep to get all those wagons and things up there. So they're going to change the main street to Harrison. So that's what they did. Harrison became the main street. Horace had a mercantile store down at the end of the street. And Augusta had her house with a great view of the Elbert Massive. Well, he's done real well. He's got that mercantile store. A couple of guys named Hook and Rish showed up, and they said, we've got a claim up there north of town. We're going to be millionaires. And Horace says, that's great. Good luck. They said, no, we need tools, but we don't have money. He said, that's okay. I am going to take care of you, and if you find silver, I get a part of your claim. You guys know what that's called?
Grub stake.
Exactly. I couldn't remember. I'm so glad you're here. So he grub staked a lot of people. Always made Augusta mad. She said there should have been money in the register. They didn't get along real well. He wanted her to dress up and go to different things. He wanted to be a politician. She did not want to dress up, and he couldn't make her. She's gonna stay home. She's gonna take care of that baby boy. So Horace went to these things on his own, and he did become the first mayor of Leadville, and he did quite well. He liked politics a lot. Eventually, he becomes our senator. It's not because Augusta dressed up and was all pretty. It's just because Horace had a really great personality. He liked giving out cigars to the guys and telling them they're going to all be millionaires. And so that's just the way Horace was. If you come over to the Mining Hall of Fame, you get to watch a PBS thing, and everybody they interviewed kind of had a half-truth to them. So don't believe everything you see over there. They said Horace didn't bathe. Well, how did they know? They weren't alive back then. I would think that he had plenty of money to have those people bring up one of those tubs and he could get into it and take a bath. I don't know. But that's just my opinion. Don't tell PPS. Anyway, Horace is doing quite well. He has moved Augusta's house. He has built that opera house. And indeed, they built it in 100 days. They also built a nice hotel right beside it called the Clarendon. Well, Horace and Augusta are not doing real well. He came home one night and he says, I'm going to be a politician. And she said, no, you're not. And he said, yes, I am. And she said, well, if you insist on being a politician, you know where the door is. Well, he knew where the door was. He got his suitcase and he did leave. He went to the Clarendon Hotel. Mr. Bush was his buddy. He's the one that built that hotel along with Tabor. And so Tabor got a room right there at the Clarendon Hotel. And he told him, he says, you know, it'd be really, really nice if we had a catwalk between here and the Opera House. That way I could just go to work and not have to go out into the weather. Most of all, so he could take his girlfriends from the Opera House over to his room. I don't know that for a fact either, so. Anyway, you'll see a lot of pictures of the two buildings with that catwalk between them. And if you happen to stop and get gas in Leadville, look up there on the side of that Opera House. You'll see 4 windows exactly the same. That one is not exactly the same. That's that door to the catwalk. Anyway, Horace is doing quite well. And in the meantime, there's a young lady that's 20 years younger than him that was born down in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. One of 14 kids. She is the most beautiful one, and her mama is going to groom her to be somebody's special wife. She didn't have to do chores or anything. And she was kind of a tomboy. She had a lot of brothers. And she did a lot of skating. She competed in the skating events. And that wasn't kosher for the young ladies to do back then. But she did it. Well, she ended up meeting this guy named Harvey Doe. He had lots of money. His mama and daddy were the richest people in town. She married Harvey Doe. Well, his parents said, "We're gonna fix you guys up. We bought you a mining claim down Central City." They all got on the train, went down there and looked it all over, and they decided this will be easy for him to take care of, and all she's got to do is take care of their home. Didn't work out like that. He'd never worked a hard day in his life. He wasn't going to work that mine. So he stayed home. He drank a lot. And she's convinced that if somebody doesn't go with that crew down to the mine, they're not going to work. So she'd wear men's mining clothes. She's going to walk downtown with that mining crew. They're going to go to work. And I don't know if y'all have ever heard this superstition, but it's bad luck to have a woman underground. So people write in their books, "Oh, she went underground, she loved the smell, she worked with the miners." I don't think so. I worked in a mine and those miners didn't like me. They tried to blow me up once. So anyway, I think that was her job, was to operate that bucket. Eventually, though, the ladies would catch up with her and they'd say, "Why are you working so hard like this? And your husband's staying drunk at home. And at night, he goes downtown to see the ladies." And she said, "I didn't know about that." She said, "I knew he's drinking." And they said, "Well, just know we told you." And so sure enough, he left one evening. She followed him downtown, hired a policeman to follow him into that house, the brothel. And because women weren't allowed in there, only the working girls. The policeman went in, came out, and he said, "Indeed, Mrs. Doe, that is your husband in there." And she said, "Okay, thank you." And so she went home and waited for him to come in. And she said, "I know what you're doing. It's time to terminate this marriage." And he said, "Okay." He says, "Just don't claim that I'm an adulterer." And she said, "Okay, I won't. But we are getting divorced." And so they got divorced there at Central City. He left, went home to his mommy. He's always been a mommy's boy. She stayed there, met a really handsome guy named Jake Sandalowski. He owned a mercantile store. She used to go in there and look at things and decide what she would or couldn't buy. And so now she's single. He's hired her to work there. Well, eventually, when she'd go to work, her tummy stuck out to about here. Everybody's saying, "Well, how did that happen? She's divorced." Well, she knew and Jake knew. So when the baby was born, it was stillborn. They buried that baby down in Central City. And the wonderful thing is that Harvey Doe's family had heard about this. They came down, gave that baby a name, and a burial. And so they were good people. They wanted to make sure that baby had a name. Someday I'm going to go down in Central City and I'm going to find that grave for that baby. Anyway, Jake Sandalowski, or Sands now, he's changed his name, told her, he says, here's some money. We've got a store in Leadville. Go up there and work. So she did. She went to Leadville. I've got the census in here, and it shows Lizzie Doe, divorced. She moved into a boarding house right there on Fifth Street, almost right across from Augusta's house. Everybody says, well, I thought she moved into that hotel with Horace. Nope, not true. All these stories about her being such a bluesy, not exactly right. One night, she went into the Saddle Rock restaurant. There sat Horace with his friend, Mr. Bush. It was packed, and so they invited her to come sit with them. She did, and it was love at first sight. They were inseparable. He's still married to Augusta. Augustus told him, she says, you know, you might not be living at home, but I know what you're doing. And as far as I'm concerned, you're a bigamist. He says, I want you to get rid of that woman. And he said, okay. So he did. He took her, put her in the Windsor Hotel down in Denver. She's out of town, out of sight, right? Well, it didn't work that way. Eventually, Augusta has told him, says, I just can't stand it because you're spending all your time down in Denver now. And he said, well, he says, I figured out a solution. I have bought you a mansion down in Denver, right across the street from the Brown Palace. And I got Maxie a job over there. Maxie's almost an adult now. Maxie becomes the manager at the Brown Palace. Augusta's living across the street in her mansion. She hates that mansion. She's moved into the servants' quarters. She doesn't have anybody there. She's really not happy with a house with Denver or any of that. And so he did finally come down. And she says, you know, this just isn't working. I want to go back. And he said, you can't. I've already sold your house to your sister. He said, well, if you ladies want to sit down, I'm sure there's room for you.
Yeah, there's plenty of space.
Anyway, so Augusta told him, says, I've got a solution for all this. Let's go across the street to the courthouse. And that's what they did. She walked in and she said, I've been married to this man for 30 years. And now he's found himself a girlfriend that's 25 years younger than him. He's left me down here in Denver, does not give me enough money to survive. And I know that when people get divorced, they have to take back their maiden name. I want to keep the last name a Tabor. I want money to survive. And the judge said, indeed, Mrs. Tabor, you deserve all that. And that's what he did. Let her keep the last name of Tabor. She got money to survive on. And Horace is now a free man. He's gone back to Leadville and he's become all kinds of wonderful politics things. And in the meantime, Augusta is getting sick. She's been traveling around with Horace in these mines and the dust and stuff. And she's decided to go out to California. Pasadena, California. There's a hospital there that will cure her. Well, she got out there and they're giving her this medicine and stuff. A family came to her and they said, Miss Tabor, we've heard you're a great seamstress. And she says, well, thank you, I think I am. He said, look at our invention. And they brought it to her, and she said, I love your invention. I like it so much, I'm going to give you money to get started. That family's last name was Singer. By the time Augusta passed away at the age of 65, she had $1.5 million that did not come from Horace Tabor. She made it on her own. Maxie went out, picked up her body, brought her back to Colorado, and she's buried down at Riverside Cemetery. Maxie got half of her inheritance, and her brothers and sisters got the other half. That finishes off Augusta. Now I'll tell you about Horace and Baby Doe. They're gonna get married. This was actually before Augusta had passed away. He even sent some people down to Durango to get a wedding certificate for them. They got a marriage certificate from Missouri. Well, they finally decided Horace has to go to Washington for 30 days. They're going to get married up there. They got married in that beautiful hotel. He bought her a $70,000 wedding dress. Bought her a diamond necklace. Cost $90,000. Supposedly, that diamond was the one that Queen Isabella sold in order to get Christopher Columbus to the Americas. Well, they got married. The president said she was the most beautiful bride he had ever seen. Thing is, they were married by a priest. If he'd have known that both of them had been married once before, he'd have never performed that ceremony. That's just the way the Catholic religion is. But they're married now. They're coming back. They're gonna go to Denver. He bought her a mansion right on 15th and Sherman Street. And he was so rich that they had 3 different sets of horses. And when they'd go out for a ride, they'd change the carriage and the horses to match whatever dress she was going to wear. Well, she basically was still a good person. Christmas time came around, she'd load that carriage full of presents and go around and give them to the kids there in Denver. Didn't help anything, though. She still was not people's favorite woman. Anyway, Horace is getting sick. He's got that lung disease. Did not call the doctors. And eventually, the doctors came to him. They had heard how sick he was. Wasn't his lungs at all. It was his appendix. It had ruptured.
Oh.
Told Baby Doe, they said, we're sorry. There's nothing we can do for him. This has ruptured, and all you can do is be there for him. And he did. He passed away. People say, oh, he told Baby Doe, hang on to the mattress, someday Silver would come back. That's not true. He might have told her that while they were married, but not on his deathbed. He was in a coma the last 2 weeks of his life. So it's up to you to decide whether he said it or not while he's in a coma. He was very down-tempered. And the graveyard he was buried in, they unearthed all those people and moved them to another. That one that they buried him in became Cheeseman Park. So when you go to Cheeseman Park to enjoy the beautiful flowers and such, just remember it was a graveyard. They moved him to Mount Olivet. Well, while they were married, though, they did have 3 children. A year after they got married, they had a little girl. And she was beautiful. 5 years after her, they had a boy. Nobody knows about that boy. That poor boy is down there at Mount Olivet Cemetery. And he died within the first day of being born. He's Horace Joseph Tabor Jr. He's buried 1 plot away from where Horace and Baby Doe are. Just in case you want to go check and see. A year after him, they had 1 more girl. Rosemary Honeymaid Echo Silver Dollar. That Silver Dollar part came when William Jennings Bryant came to visit. He said, that is the most beautiful baby, and she has a wonderful laugh. It sounds like the ringing of a silver dollar. That's where that silver dollar part of her name came from. Well, they added that to it. She grew up, became a hellion, just like Baby Doe was when she was a young girl. She just ran rampant through Leadville, rode her horse everywhere, rode it so fast the horse would fall down. And so when she got old enough to leave, Baby Doe was ready for her to go. She went to Denver and became a newspaper writer. And she had written a poem about her dad and President Roosevelt going hunting together. President Roosevelt showed up. He says, I want to see that girl. And indeed, they met, and she's decided she's famous now. She knows the president. Told her mama, she says, I'm going to Chicago to live. I'm famous. I can be a writer. And her mom said, what are you going to do if you're not? Are you going to come home? She said, no. Says, I'll enter a convent, become a nun. And said, okay. And so off went Silver Dollar to Chicago. She did not become a writer. She wasn't very good at it. Then she decided she was going to be an actress. That was when the movies were silent movies. I actually got to see part of one. That girl was gorgeous. Beautiful blue eyes, long black curly hair. Wonder where she got that from. Horace didn't have black hair. Baby Doe didn't have black hair. Maybe Sandalowski's been lurking around. I'm not saying anything. But anyway, then the talkies came along. That girl could not be in the talkies. She had a speech impediment. So she became a dancer for the gangsters. Headlines came out and it says Senator Tabors' daughter dies. Mysterious death in Chicago hotel room. They found her scalded to death. Evidently, the gangsters had gone into her room and found her asleep on her bed. And everybody always kept pots of steaming water on their radiators. And they just scalded her to death. She's buried in Chicago. They tried to get Baby Doe to come up, and she said, nope, that's not my daughter. My daughter's become a nun. And that's why she doesn't write to me. They tried to get her sister to come. She said, I don't have any relatives that would live like that woman did. I will not come. So Baby Doe's brother, Peter, went, and he made sure that she had a burial. All right, so that kind of finished all that off. Horace is dead. Silver Dollar is dead. Baby Doe has gone back to Leadville and is going to live in that cabin one way or another. She was renting a house down in Leadville. Her sister showed up and said, you know, I think we're going to get enough money to buy the lien on the mattress. And they did. Nobody knows where they got that money from. Maybe it was from that diamond necklace. Nobody knows where that went. They paid the lien on the mattress, went up there, and they told the guy that was the foreman, I'm sorry, you're going to have to move out of this cabin because Lizzie, or Elizabeth, is now the secretary of the Matchless Mine Estates. And he did. He moved out. He knew. While she was in that cabin, she realized there's somebody else living here. There's a guy living down in a cabin down below Sick Shaft. His name was George Smith. She went down and confronted him, and then she realized she and Horace had hired that man to take care of the matchless when they got married. And that's why he was there. He lived there until 3 years before Baby Doe died. He died there. He lived down a little cabin down below Sick Shaft. If you ever come over to the matchless, you'll see all this, and it'll come back to you. Well, they were just employer, employee. He would come around in the morning and he'd say, Miss Tabor, what can I do for you? And she'd say, I need some wood cut. I've got a leak in the roof. And he'd do those things for her. I'm not taking away the fact that she lived up there and she did take good care of herself and she did chop wood and ran that wood stove and stuff. But she had George Smith up there helping her. The way I know a lot of this stuff is because Judge Neil Reynolds from over in Leadville was the best historian I ever met in my life. And I'd drive him crazy. I'd say, tell me more about Baby Doe. And one day he said, Brenda, you know it all. Go check on George Smith. And I did. I asked my friend Janice from the library, I said, who's George Smith? And he says, I don't know, but we'll find out. She came back with a pile of papers about this high, and George Smith was their caretaker. And so I've got a lot of that stuff in here too. It's just too much trouble to go through that. Someday I will get a PowerPoint up here and I'll be able to show you guys all this. I'll be back. You can't get rid of me. And so these people that say she lived up there for 30 years all by herself, maybe they're not exactly right. About a month after I found out about him, I had a guy on my tour. He's from Germany, Michael Marschke. And he said, maybe you know about my uncle. And I said, who is he? And he told me this German name, you know. And I said, oh no, I don't know any of that stuff. Go to the library, maybe they can find him. He said, well, the reason I ask you is his best friend was the caretaker here. And I said, really? What was his name? He says, George Smith. He had all these letters from his uncle and George Smith. So it just, you know, showed me that it really was true, that he did, you know, live down there. And one morning, he didn't show up, good old George Smith. And she went down to his cabin, looked in his window, and there he sat beside his stove. And he had passed away during the night sitting there. The sheriff came and got his body. I have no idea where he's buried. Someday I'm going to go drive them crazy. See if they'll check for me. I'd like to find out. I'm sure he's probably buried in Pauper's Row, somewhere there in Leadville. But anyway, so Baby Doe lived in that cabin for the last 3 years of her life by herself. Her appearance changed. She started wearing a long black coat, long skirt, scarf around her face. Maybe that was because of the 1912 flu. Everybody said, how did she survive that? She had a lady friend down in Denver that she would stay with when she went down there to do her banking. Judge Reynolds showed me a letter, and it was from that lady, and she said, I know there's a lot of sickness going around, and you don't have any money, you got holes in your shoes. I'm sending you $5. Get some shoes and come to me. I'll take care of you. And I'm sure that's what she did. She stayed down there with her lady friend until the flu was over, and then she came back up to Leadville. She would walk 1.25 miles down to town to get her groceries, and that's something else. I've talked to some of the citizens over in Leadville, and they said, you know, my grandmother knew her. She'd stop by and visit with her. And they'd see her coming up the walk, and they'd yell at the kids and say, go the other room, shut the door. And that's what they'd do. And Baby Doe would come in, warm up, have some tea with them, and then she'd continue on back up to her cabin. She'd stop and talk to the priest there. She told him, she says, you know, I'm having nightmares. I don't know what to do. And the priest just said, you know, you work hard and you have dreams like that. Don't worry about it. Says you're living a good Catholic life and you're going to be fine. And so with her appearance, she would wear the long skirt, the white blouse, the scarf around her face, put her hair up under her hat. And I'll tell you the truth, to me, I think she resembled a nun. She would not take any food, clothing from people when they brought it up. And she'd say, I'm sorry, I can't take that, go away, I'm trying to sleep. And the people would leave it at her doorstep. And when she'd get up later, she'd look. And in that stuff, she would take what she needed. And then she'd take the rest of that down to the church and leave it as a donation. When she died, They says, oh, she froze to death up in that cabin. Serves her right. Nope, she didn't. I've got her death certificate, a copy of it here. She died from heart disease. She had a heart attack and she fell on the floor, not far from the stove. But it wasn't like Carolyn Bancroft said in her book. She didn't lay there in a cross. That's not true. She wasn't scratching her way to the stove. That's not true. She had plenty of wood. And she just had a heart attack and died in the floor. They had a burial for her down at the church. Judge Riddles told me, he said my daddy was a little boy when she died, and he got to go to her service. They had an open service for her, and her hair was still a golden blonde. It went all the way down to her knees. And so all these people had said, oh, she's drinking that water out of that pond. That's why she died. She died from lead poisoning. Let me tell you, if she died from lead poisoning, it missed her hair. If you're drinking lead water, your hair's gonna fall out. So all these stories that you hear about her are not true. She was not a prostitute. She was not a lady of ill repute. Down in Central City, she might have had her times. But, when she got to Leadville and found Tabor, she was true to him. She loved him. Well, she died. Leadville's gonna bury her. No. Denver says they're gonna bury her. Well, that's where Horace is buried, down Mount Olivet down there. He said, we've got a spot for her down there. Well, they fought over her for at least 2 months. That poor lady laid in that coffin, waiting to find out where she's gonna be. Denver won. Baby Doe is buried down at Mount Olivet, down there next to Horace Tabor, and that baby boy is buried 1 plot away from them. People broke into that cabin. They ransacked it. They took everything that was not tied down. So, and I had pictures of that too. It's just breaks my heart that they did that. They were convinced anything that belonged to her was worth money, and they might find something hidden in that cabin that was worth a lot of money, like the diamond necklace. They never found anything. Well, years after she died, they found a bunch of trunks that she had stored things in, her writings. She wrote things. She just wrote like a crazy woman. All those are in those trunks. There's 7 of them. She had stored some of them up at the old hospital in Leadville, some of them down in Denver at the convent. They finally opened up those trunks, and there's all that writings. But also, there is her wedding dress. There is indeed some jewelry that's worth money. The little girl's christening dresses that were worth $7,000. All kinds of things were stored in those trunks. She could have taken that and sold it anytime she wanted, but she didn't. Like I say, her dressing reminded me of a nun. I think she was doing penance. She could have sold any of that stuff that was in the trunks anytime she wanted to have lived better. She didn't. When you're doing penance, you do not take money. You do not take things from people. And so she just left it all in those trunks. So everybody says, oh, she died penniless. That's wrong. She didn't die penniless. She died very wealthy if she would have cashed it in. And so I hope that I've debunked some of the stories you guys have heard about Baby Doe. And I hope you come over to Leadville after Memorial Day and go on my tour. And I think it'll make a lot more sense to you then. But I loved Augusta and I loved Baby Doe. They're both wonderful women that were just in love with the same man. And that's my Baby Doe story, guys. If you want to, huh?